5016, 5017, 5018, 5019, 5020. Page 5021, 5022, 5023, 5024, 5025, 5026, 5027, 5028, 5029, 5030. Page 5031, 5032, 5033, 5034, 5035, 5036, 5037, 5038, 5039, 5040. Page 5041, 5042, 5043, 5044, 5045, 5046, 5047, 5048, 5049, page 5050. 5051, 5052, 5053, 5054. Distinguished Senator Francis Adenigba, Father Usi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Francis Adenigba Fadamsi, OFR from Osun East. I stand to move that the votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 13th April 2022 be approved. I so move.
Thank you. Distinguished Senator Ifanyuba.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, colleagues, I stand to second the votes and proceeding. So second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 13th April 2022 be approved, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 13th April 2022 is hereby approved. Letter from Mr. President. Dear distinguished Senate President, transmission of the Money Laundering Prohibition Bill 2022 and Terrorism Prevention Bill 2022 for consideration. Pursuant to Section 58, Subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, I forward here with the Money Laundering Prohibition Bill 2022 and Terrorism Prevention Bill 2022 for the kind consideration of the Senate. During the recent mutual evaluation carried out by the Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa, GABA, they have observed deficiencies in Nigeria's anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism regime. Following the evaluation, the Ministry of Justice and other relevant stakeholders reviewed said deficiencies and drafted the Money Laundering Prohibition Bill 2022 and Terrorism Prevention Bill 2022. Unless these deficiencies are addressed promptly by the National Assembly in order to bring our legal regime in conformity with the Financial Action Task Force recommendations, Nigeria will face the risk of a negative public statement blacklisting the country by FATF, and this will lead to some negative consequences to our rapidly growing economy. In light of the above, the Federal Ministry of Justice reviewed the Money Laundering Prohibition Bill and Terrorism Prevention Bill currently pending before the National Assembly and have come up with revised versions of the bills incorporating the resolutions to the deficiencies pointed out in the mutual evaluation report, thereby bringing Nigeria's AML/CFT legal regime in conformity with the FATF recommendations. While I look forward to your usual expeditious consideration of this submission, please accept, the distinguished Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration. Yours sincerely, Muhammadu Buhari. Letter from the distinguished Senator Chukwuma Frank Ibezim, Imo North Senatorial District. Your Excellency, wedding invitation. I write to convey a letter of wedding invitation from the Governor of Imo State, His Excellency, distinguished Senator Hope Uzodinma, to the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I have enclosed here with the letter for your kind announcement to the Senate, sir. Please accept the assurances of my highest regard. Signed, Senator Chukwuma Frank Ibezim, Imo North Senatorial District. And the letter of invitation from the office of the Governor of Imo State reads, Dear distinguished Senators, wedding invitation. I'm exceedingly joyful to invite you, my distinguished colleagues, on behalf of my family, to the wedding celebrations of my dear daughter Chioma. She will soon be joined together in holy matrimony with Chinedu Ohere, the man that has captured her heart. Since nothing gladdens the mind of parents more than being living witnesses to the marriage of their children, with family and friends in attendance, my family would be highly honored if you all, distinguished senators, would be our special guests as I lead my daughter down the aisle. The celebrations of love are scheduled as follows. Traditional venue, His Excellency Hope Uzodinma's residence, Ozu Omuma, Oru East Local Government Area, Imo State. Date, April 28, 2022. Time 2 p.m. Church service, Maria Azumta Cathedral, Owerri. Date, Saturday, April 30, 2022. Time 12 noon. Reception follows immediately after the church service. Venue, the event center, Ndubisi Kanu Square, New Owerri. While we solicit for your prayers for the young couple as they embark on this important phase of their life's journey, would be immensely glad to have your distinguished presence grace the momentous occasions. May God guard and guide you as you come. Yours sincerely, distinguished Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor. Petitions. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President,
Leader, just give me a second. Distinguished Senator Ifanyuba, Senator Uche Lillian Ekwenefe wanted to raise a point of order. She's not here. Would you like to raise it? Okay. Which point of order? No. You can come under 42 only. I would advise, because that was our understanding with her, but you said, sorry? We leave it. Then we are going to recess. What? No. Why do you want to leave it? Are you not ready? Okay, but you say you want to raise it under order 4252. So if you are not ready, how can you say you want to raise it? Are you ready to go ahead? Please go ahead. Raise the point of order you want to raise first.
Mr. President, Order 42 of the serious issues of national importance that has a very serious implication on the life of our constituent, and the death of a famous musician in the country, arising from unknown, suspected to be from a domestic accident.
Which order are you? Order 42. That's personal explanation, right? Okay, you go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I want to bring to the knowledge of the Senate about the death of Osinachi Nwachukwu, who is married to someone from my constituent, and whom most of us must have heard from the news about her death. Mr. President, it has to do with a lot of suspicion concerning her death, and I think it's very, very important I bring this notice to this Halo chamber so that we see how this chamber can help to unravel the issues surrounding her death, which is very, very pathetic. This is my submission, Mr. President. And I also want us to have a minute silence for.
Okay, I think essentially you want to inform the Senate of the death of that lady, isn't it? And a minute silence in our honor. Okay, please, can you send somebody should collect the name. The name is Osinachi Nwachukwu. Okay, and you're asking for a minute silence in honor of the deceased. Because you have come under this, our order on personal explanation, which is officially to inform the Senate, and through the Senate, the public, this is not something that we have to debate by our standing rules. So, sorry? Okay. So this is not subject to any debate, but let me say that the authorities should investigate the death of this citizen, and the life of every citizen should matter, must matter actually. And this is one death too many. Secondly, you want us to observe a minute silence in her honor. Please, distinguished colleagues, let's observe a 1 minute silence in honor of the deceased. May the soul of Osinachi Nwachukwu rest in perfect peace. Amen. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is the presentation and consideration. The first business of the day is the presentation of an executive bill standing in my name on the National Senior Secondary School Education Commission Establishment Bill 2022. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, National Senior Secondary Education Commission Establishment Bill 2022, SB 950 and SB 994, first reading.
National Senior Secondary Education Commission Establishment Bill 2022, SB 996, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Finance on the revised 2022 fiscal framework of the Federal Government of Nigeria. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Solomon Olamilekan Adiola to move the motion for the Senate to receive and consider the report of the committee.
Distinguished Senator Solomon Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, Lagos West.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague, Adiola Solomon Olamilekan. May I move that this Senate do receive the Committee on Finance report on the revised 2022 fiscal framework of the Federal Government of Nigeria. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I so move.
Distinguished Senator Issa Jibrin.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am Issa Jibrin, representing Kogi East. I rise to second the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Finance on the revised 2022 fiscal framework, as moved by most distinguished Senator Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, Chairman Senate Committee on Finance. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Finance on the revised 2022 fiscal framework, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. You may lead the report, please, Chairman. Chairman, you may present the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, Adiola Solomon Olamilekon. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, you will recall that last week, the President's letter was read on the floor of the Senate, where the understanding of the Senate was sought to revise the fiscal framework that was earlier passed by the Senate. Mr. President, 1.0 is the introduction, which states that it was on Tuesday, April 22, when the letter was read and same was committed to the Senate Committee on Finance. 2.0 is the background, which states clearly that a further revision of the 2022 fiscal framework on which the 2022 budget was based or predicated upon was necessitated by the new development both in the global economy as well as in the domestic economy. These developments include the spike in the market price of crude oil, aggravated by the Russian-Ukraine war, significantly lower oil production volume due principally to the production shut in as a result of massive theft of crude oil between the production platform and the various terminals. Also, the decision to suspend the removal of petroleum motor spirit, the PMS subsidy, at a time when high crude oil prices have elevated the subsidy cost and have significantly eroded the government revenue. In addition to the above, there is need to make some adequate provision for the recent enhancement of the allowances for the men and women of the Nigerian police and to boost their morale as they grapple with the heightened security challenges in the country. 3.0 contained the adjustment to the 2022 fiscal framework. The adjustment to the 2022 fiscal framework include an increase in the projected oil price benchmark by $11 per barrel. That is from $62 per barrel to $73 per barrel. A reduction in the projected oil production volume by 280,000 barrels per day. That is from 1.883 million barrels per day to 1.6 million barrels per day. And this, as I have said earlier on, was due to massive theft of the oil crude between the production platform and the terminals. And as well, the increase in the benchmark of oil from $62 to $73 per barrel is as a result of the increase in the subsidy regime. 3, an increase in the estimated provision of the PMS subsidy for 2022 by 3.557 trillion. That is from the 442.72 billion to 4 trillion naira. What was projected or budgeted for in 2022 budget approved by this National Assembly was 442.72 billion. But the reality on ground shows that we can no longer cope, and this can no longer serve us as a nation if we must retain the subsidy regime. And it is to that effect the President is asking the Senate to increase the subsidy from that 442.72 to 3.557 trillion naira. That is totaling 4 trillion naira. A cut in the production for the federally funded upstream project, which implemented 200 billion from the 5.80 billion. This is the federal government contribution to the upstream project, that is the crude oil production. We observe that the 3.55280 can no longer stand as a result of cuts in the oil production from 1.883 to 1.6 million barrels per day. To that extent, we have to cut 200 billion naira from these said federal funded upstream projects. 5, an increase in the projection for the federal government independent revenue by 400 billion naira. And I strongly believe that with the effort put in place by this committee on behalf of the Senate to ensure that all revenue due to the federal government gets to the federal government coffers, and we are aware that last year's projection of 536 billion, but the eventual we actually got from the independent revenue stood at 1.4 trillion naira at the end of the financial year ending December 2021. An additional provision of 182.5 billion to cater for the needs of the Nigerian police force. And as I said, this was as a result of the increase in the allowances of Nigerian police to confront the security challenges that is currently confronting us as a nation. Based on the above adjustment, the federal government's main pool revenue for the 3 tiers of government is projected to decline by 2.418 trillion, while the FGN share from the account net of transfer of the federal capital territory and other statutory deduction is projected to reduce by 1.17 trillion naira. But however, the amount available to fund the FGN budget is projected to decline by 772.91 billion naira due to the increase in the projection of the independent revenue, that is the operating surplus. And what that tends to say is that the total reduction in revenue is 2.418 trillion, but the federal government portion of this 2.418 trillion is 1.17 trillion naira. But as a result of efforts to increase the independent revenue by 400 billion, that also reduced further to 772.91 billion naira. An aggregate expenditure is projected to increase by 192.52 billion due to the increase in the personnel cost by 161.40 billion and other service-wide votes of 21.05 billion. Additional domestic debt provision of 76.13 billion and the net reduction in the statutory transfer by 66.07 billion as follows. Before I go to that, the 161.40, if you add it to the 210.5, put together, we give you the 182.5 billion naira being sought for by the Nigerian police to augment their allowances. The 161 billion naira was what is going to the personnel cost, in addition with the 50 billion naira earlier made by this Senate, approved by this Senate in the service-wide vote for the police. The two put together will come to 211 billion naira, which will be going to the personnel cost of the Nigerian police, while the 21.05 billion naira is for their pension and other related costs of the Nigerian police. As I've said, the reduction in the statutory transfer by 66.07 billion is as follows. The NDDC by 13.46 billion from 102.78 to 89.32 billion, and NEDC by 6.30 billion from 48.08 billion to 41.78 billion. UBEC, Basic Healthcare Fund, NASENI, and host of others also are duly affected. The total budget deficit is projected to increase by 965.42 billion to 7.35 trillion, representing 3.99 of the GDP. The incremental deficit will be financed by new borrowing from the domestic market. Findings and observations. 1. An increase in the projected oil benchmark of $11 per barrel from $62 per barrel to $73 per barrel. 2. A reduction in the projected oil production volume by 280,000 barrels per day, that is from 1.883 million barrels per day to 1.6 million barrels per day. 3. An increase in the estimated provision for PMS subsidy for 2022 by 3.557 trillion from 442.72 billion, that is put together will give us 4 trillion naira. 4. A cut in the provision for the federally funded upstream project being implemented by 200 billion, that is from the 352.80 billion earlier provided for in the budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. 5, an increase in the projection for the federal government independent revenue by the sum of 400 billion naira. 6, an additional provision of 182.5 billion to cater for the needs of the Nigerian police force. 7, the Federation account's main pool revenue for the 3 tiers of government is projected to decline by 2.418 trillion. 8, the federal government share from this account, net of transfer of the federal capital territory and other statutory deduction, is projected to reduce by 1.173 trillion. 9, the amount available to fund the FGM budget is projected to decline by 772.91 billion due to the increase in the projection for the independent revenue operating surplus by 400 billion naira. An aggregate expenditure is projected to increase by 192.52 billion due to the increase in personnel costs by 161.4 billion and other service-wide goods by 21.05, both for the Nigerian police. The domestic debt service provision of 76.13 billion and the net reduction in the statutory transfer by 66.07 billion, which is as follows as earlier put forward there by me. 12, the total budget deficit is projected to increase by 965.42 billion to 7.35 trillion, representing 3.99 of the GDP. The incremental deficit, as earlier mentioned, will be financed by the new borrowing from the domestic market. Recommendation: 1, the oil benchmark of $73 per barrel be approved. 2, the oil production volume of 1,600,000 per day be approved. Petroleum motor spirit subsidy of 4 trillion be approved. A cut in the provision for federally funded upstream budget by 200 billion naira be approved. An increase in the federal government independent revenue by 400 billion naira be approved. An additional provision of 182.45 billion to cater for the needs of the Nigerian police force be approved. Domestic debt service provision of 76.13 billion and the net reduction in the statutory transfer of 66.07 billion be approved as follows. Conclusion. Okay. The fiscal deficit of 7.35 trillion be approved. On behalf of the Senate Committee on Finance, I wish to express my profound appreciation to the Senate President and the entire Senate for the opportunity to serve, and I'm indeed very grateful to all members of the committee. Signed, Adeola Olamide. Thank you, Mr. President. I so submit.
Any comments? Senator Tokumbo Abu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the President of Senate, and my dear colleagues. As much as I completely agree for the need for this revised benchmark for the 2022 budget, essentially arising from the international plays, around the Russia-Ukraine issues, I think that, and of course, again, the need to also meet some of the needs of our larger population in terms of the inflationary pressures. So my major concern will be around the fact that as we take advantage of the increase in the oil price arising from all these global plays, I think it's of serious concern that we can't also take advantage of the volumes that should also compensate. Because in a situation like this, you just don't take advantage of the price increase alone. You also take advantage of the volume. So the assumption around reduction of the volume from 1.8 to 1.6 or to 80,000 barrels is a major concern. And it worries me because we have also appropriated a lot of money for the security apparatus. We are also still making recommendations for the increase in boosting the morale of the police, but we are not getting the value, because the excuse around the oil theft, I don't think is something that we should accept. we must challenge the security operatives. The people, I mean, that those thieving this oil, I mean, the oil, they are not ghosts. We can't be pumping money in one hand and losing money in another, from another angle. I think that we must really put pressure on the people that are meant to provide this asset and the platforms under which this asset can be better put into use. So for me, it is okay. I mean, so some of these assumptions are okay given the current scenario, but I think very strongly the issues around the reduction in the volume should be addressed. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Olumimi Adetunbi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Olubunmi Adetunbi representing Ekiti North. I feel so sad that we found ourselves at this point because the entire world, oil-producing world, is harvesting from the Russian-Ukrainian crisis and smiling to the bank with improved revenue and public spending. But this is producing an exact opposite scenario in Nigeria because of the singular peculiarity of our security challenge. This is a clear demonstration of the impact of the national security problem on the economy. And as far as public spending is concerned, this is a huge blow. Increase in oil revenue with a paradoxical reduction in volume. Increase in borrowing when the whole world is saying, oh, happy day for us, we wish this crisis should be extended. We are also praying now that that crisis should stop because it's leading us into further debt and an inability to fund the public expenditure. I think while this is expedient and it's a fait accompli, if your money is not coming well enough or you are not producing well enough, you have to cut down your cloth according to your size. But the truth of the matter is that I think what the Senate needs to emphasize is the fact that we owe it a duty to our economy to stop oil stealing. Because one of the excuses, stated here is massive oil stealing in a sovereign that has the monopoly of violence constitutionally. I mean, this is the issue that is before us, that as a state, as a nation state, a sovereign state, it should not be impossible for us to stop people that are stealing our commonwealth in order to fund our country. This is the bottom line, Mr. President. The figures are very clear. The chairman finance has given the best he can do. He has to balance his revenue and expenditure and still borrow in order to fund the public expenditure. But nonetheless, why are we here is because there's a security failure. And we have to address that and ask ourselves, how soon will it take us to get out of this oil stealing, different embarrassing statistics about 85%, 95%. People just quote figures of the quantity of oil that has been stolen. And that's where we are. Mr. President, I think this is a painful vacation. And on a parting note for a vacation, this is not a happy place to be.
Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I think the issues that have been raised by Senator Adetunbi are very clear and grotesque. What he has stated is absolutely correct. In fact, actually, we should be mourning about what is happening to our economy. And he has laid the blame where it surely lies, on the issue of insecurity. Here we are as a sovereign, as a nation, where we cannot even protect an asset that lays the golden eggs for the people of this country. At the time when we conducted the 2022 budget, and finished it, and it was signed into law by the president before the beginning of this year. We are all ebullient that Nigeria is reaching out and becoming great, and that the government spending is going to be panacea that is going to wipe out all the challenges, at least most of the major challenges, including the challenges of insecurity, because we thought we have voted enough resources to secure this country. But unfortunately, we have reached a point where all over the world, those who are producing oil are reaping the benefits of higher prices. And here we are, when the prices of oil are reaching 11-year, 10-year high. Instead of increasing our own expenditure to service our people, we have to reduce our own budgetary expenditure. Now we have to look and be very, very careful about where we are going. Because the only thing that is going to get us certain platform is the amount of resources that we'll be able to spend on the people of this country. And this we can never do. Therefore, the security challenges facing our country are the greatest bane for the development of our nation. So this Senate should be on record, just like Senator Adetumbi had said, to have insisted and to have noted that these negative trends have to be addressed very, very seriously by the executive arm of government. I am pained. I'm pained to say that from the way things are going, it seems that people are just taking these kind of challenges very, very lightly. They think these are just like winter or summer winds or heat that will just come and go. These have a structural dimension to what this country is going to be today and in the immediate future. We are only a country. We are a country that is suffering when everybody is supposed to smile. We have to take what is happening to the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian nation very, very seriously. I thank Senator Adetumbi for bringing this to our attention. But this is a bullet. It's a bullet into the heart of the nation that we must bite. We must bite this bullet because that's the only reality that is on the ground. But we should be careful going forward into the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Kabiruga.
Mr. President, I'm Kabiruga, representing the people of Kano South from Kano State. Mr. President, I would like to support the two speakers just before me, that the leader and the Adetumbi, for the fact that we are very worried with the situation happening in Nigeria, sir. The oil theft is becoming a very serious matter. One day we'll have nothing to get for the Federation account from the NNPC. Therefore, Mr. President, we are aware that they used to break the pipelines that bring in crude to the main discharge area. At the same time, they also connive when a ship is supposed to carry 1 million barrels in the vessel, it will be loaded 2 million barrels. And that's another open theft by oil companies. So, Mr. President, for us to solve this, I believe and I'm requesting, with the approval of my colleagues, that we set up a committee to investigate this oil theft because it's getting too rampant. One day we will have nothing to share in this country based on the oil we are selling out, because we don't have the opportunity of selling, because we are allowing these thefts to continue. So, Mr. President, my prayer is to set up a committee to investigate this oil theft. Thank you, sir.
Senator Gabriel Suswam.
Mr. President, I'm Dr. Gabriel Suswam, Benue Northeast. Mr. President, let me first commend the chairman for the comprehensive presentation, laying the issue bare as they are. Mr. President, I will comment on three main items here. First would be the deficit, the subsidy, Mr. President, the domestic debt as presented here. Mr. President, in the main budget, issues of deficit were raised on the floor of the Senate here. And the worry and the concern was the financing item. From the presentation of the chairman here, which is what was presented to him from finance, what we have here is that it will be financed from the capital market. Mr. President, as far as I'm concerned, as far as we know, this does not exist. Mr. President, when you have a deficit as high as 7-point-something trillion, with a threshold of 3.99, which is totally and absolutely above the threshold as presented by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it means that the budget ab initio cannot be implemented. We cannot have a budget with this kind of deficit and then the financing items are so fluid. There's nothing specific, it's very fluid. Capital market, how? What we had presented before was that this will be financed from the sale of government asset. Now it is capital market. It is not stated. That is the fluid statement. We are dealing with a serious situation and we must be serious about it. So, Mr. President, this deficit, and based on the threshold of 3.99, Mr. President, it will be very difficult to finance the deficit. And once you don't do it, which then means that the deficit we have here presented on paper here will be about 10 trillion. That is what it means. Because once you are unable to assess the financing item for a deficit, there's an increment in the deficit. So the deficit that we have is about 10 trillion, is not 7, Mr. President, based on what is presented here. I'll go to the next one, Mr. President, which is the issue of the subsidy. When we invited the Group Managing Director of NNPC to appear before the two committees of upstream and downstream, what he presented to us, as stated here by the other previous speakers, Mr. President, was very scary. And so when you have that kind of situation, and now you say that you are increasing the subsidy, yes, we all agree that there was a need for the President to consider stalling on the issue of subsidy. But the statistics, what is the statistics that this subsidy will be increased from 3-point-something to 4 trillion? Subsidy. And then we don't have the statistics. This is something that I had expected that would be stated here clearly. Mr. President, the other issue which I have raised here consistently is the issue of tax expenditure. If we look at the tax expenditure, Mr. President, it's about 2.4 trillion. Those tax expenditures are tax deferrals and exemption given to certain companies and individuals. Mr. President, we need to know who are the beneficiaries. Otherwise, why don't we reduce the tax expenditure to something about 1 trillion or even in the billions? Let us know who are the people benefiting from this tax expenditure. If we have tax expenditure as high as 2-point-something trillion, and then we are looking for money to finance deficit, Mr. President, there is an absolute need for us to consider and look seriously at the beneficiaries of this tax expenditure. Because these are ways where people are taking money, embezzling money without us actually knowing, and we are just being bamboozled into passing something that we do not know. Finally, Mr. President, the domestic debt service, I have also argued here before. Mr. President, domestic debt service, with the increment in this, what it does is that it depletes completely the economy of the country because it crowds out private sector borrowing. It crowds out completely private sector borrowing, Mr. President. We cannot continue to increase domestic debt service when we know that this is money where they engage in quantitative easing. Basically what that means is that they're printing money. And that is why our naira is fluctuating like a yo-yo. There is no way it can be stabilized when all that you do is to print money to service debt. and then people who own it would have borrowed money to change and increase employment in the economy are being crowded out because all of this is going to the capital market, like he said. If the government is going to capital market, what would the private sector do? Who will increase employment and enhance the economy of our country? So, Mr. President, we needed to have had this document at least a day to look at it. Unfortunately, we're just seeing it now. But most of the items, the parameters set here, Mr. President, shows clearly that we have a big problem. And I want to agree totally with the leader of the Senate. Mr. President, the problem should be such that as a Senate who represent the people, we should have an opportunity to look at this properly before passing it. Because we're passing something that will impact negatively on the people that we represent. And we're saying that we represent hopes, fears, and aspirations of those people. And then we come and pass a revenue profile that will impact negatively on them. Mr. President, it does not make sense. And so my submission, Mr. President, is that we shouldn't rush in passing this report. There are issues here that are very fundamental that must be properly looked at for us to take a decision, Mr. President. And so,
Senator Chukwuka Utazi.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Thank you for giving me opportunity to contribute on the paper just presented by our Chairman Finance Committee on the review of the fiscal framework. Mr. President, the report is very short but very concise. In my own words, it covered the field. Looking at the issue of oil production and the losses we are consistently having over time, I think as a nation and as a parliament, this is the time for us to really look into what is happening in the oil industry of this country. This continued bleeding cannot be allowed to continue. Whereas we are borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, but even the one we have that is under our own care, we cannot manage that. Is not good for our country. Mr. President, I am of the opinion, and a strong opinion for that matter, that maybe after the break, there is need that we invite the people in the headship of our oil industry here for us to have an interface. This is not rocket science. Most of us who are specialists and professionals in the field have idea about what's going on there and even have solutions. And one of it is, I want to say, Mr. President, to this continued oil theft, is that we have Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. It's an international organization that their proficiency is looking into oil and gas all over. In Nigeria, we have our own type that is domesticated from taking a cue from Haiti. That is Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. They have been writing consistently to us here, giving a report of what's going on in the oil industry. These senates have never given time to read that work they have been presenting to us and bring it to bear on the issue that is before us, all of us here. So I'm asking that we have to do something. I know that you have, in the less than 2 years, you have been on this saddle. You have, convoked a lot of committees that will go out of the way to look into serious issues of this nature, we really have to do something about it. Because I'll tell you one thing here. When I was the chairman of the Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes, I, on behalf of this country, attended the Transparency, International meetings in London. And the issue of this selling of gas, oil and gas in Nigeria came up. And I asked a question. I told them that all the ocean-going vessels that leave their shores of all parts of Europe to come to Africa to fetch a crude oil, do you keep record of those ocean-going vessels? They said yes. So you know where they're coming from. You know they are leaving UK, for instance. You know they are leaving France, for instance. You know they are leaving Germany. They say they have records. I said, if you have records, okay. When these vessels return, bearing crude oil back to our shores, do you also keep record about them? They said yes. I said, that's the answer. What again are we looking for? So if we know the ones that have genuinely got their crude oil from Nigeria through the NNPC, with the Department of Petroleum Resources that now have been changed their name now, they have the access to it. So if we have the records of that, what is stopping us as a...
You can round up, please. Please round up.
It's very, very important that we have to coordinate efforts and use our NAIT to work with AIT so that we can get source of this. And if we do that, Mr. President, we will be solving the problem of the oil stealing, the crude oil stealing in this country. This step will come to an end so that we can benefit. If you have Ukraine and the Russian decision, now that they want production, we can't even take advantage of such because we are...
The Sungus, you have to round up now because other people are raising their hands. Round up, please. Senator Betty Apiafi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Betty Apiafi. I represent Rivers West Senatorial District. Mr. President, I'd like to align with all my colleagues who have spoken on this issue, and especially what Senator Suswan has said. Mr. President, I believe firmly that we should not approve this reverse fiscal framework as it spells doom for the Nigerian economy. We need to do more work and we need to ask questions. One of the questions we need to ask, Mr. President, is what have we been doing to reduce oil theft? If we're losing 280 barrels of oil per day, what has the Nigerian government done? Nobody has given us an explanation, and then we want to approve that loss and want it to go on. Is there a timeline? Are we going to leave it for the next budget, and then we approve a higher amount in 2023? So I don't think it's something we just flip over and move on to approve. And then, of course, the issue of subsidy. The subsidy that was approved when we passed this budget was 442 billion naira. Now we are moving from 442 billion naira to 4 trillion. The MD of refinery has been here before, and they're supposed to be working on the Nigerian refineries. Does it mean that we have no plans for any domestic refining of oil? Must we keep importing 100% of the products we use? What is the timeline? Are we going to keep doing this? NNPC has transisted from under recovery. Now we have gone back to subsidy. And now we are moving from billion to trillion. It is so sad because this is money we should have used for developing our economy. We're using that money for pure consumption, useless consumption, and funding corruption. And this cannot be allowed. We should never allow this. There has to be an explanation, and it has to be matched by the quantity of crude we are importing for us to pay 4 trillion to be importing PMS. And then, of course, going back to areas you have reduced, we have got to reduce those things that are critical to the people of Nigeria. They are critical, like NDDC. We are reducing NDDC funding by 13.46 billion. We are reducing UBEC funding by 23 billion. We are reducing basic health care fund by 11 billion. Basic health fund that is not even enough. And now that Nigerians are facing so much health challenges, based on the insecurity that has created so many displaced people with all sorts of e-health, our hospitals are not well funded, primary health centers are not funded at all. And these are the areas we are supposed to be using this basic healthcare fund to address. And now we are reducing it by 11.58 billion. Mr. President, I think we seriously need to ask questions before we proceed further with this reverse fiscal framework. We can't just approve it today. We need to keep it and call some people. Let them give us timelines when they want to stop this. Because if we bring back this in next budget, it will be already we are in a very precarious situation as a nation. Our economy is gone, and we can't continue to do this. We just have to put a stop on this as a nation. And these red chambers owe the Nigerian people that responsibility. Thank you, Mr. President.
And you may respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very, very distinguished colleague. Let me start by thanking my colleague for all the observations that have been raised, and let me assure the Senate that this report I've just presented before the Senate was not just a document submitted to us by the executive, but was arrived at after a series of meetings with the executive. It was based on the reality that was before us that necessitated the action of putting together this revised medium-term expenditure framework. So it's not just that the executive presented a document to us and we worked on it and bring it before the Senate. Extensive meeting, extensive discussion went into this before arriving at this document. My very distinguished colleague, for the issue of security challenge, you are right, but there is need for us to reduce this production, daily production per day, because as we speak, what we are even doing is about 1.2, 1.3 million barrels per day. That is the reality. That is the reality. And the government is not resting on its ass. They are doing everything to curb and to curtail this. I will come in. Sir, recently, the Committee on Finance invited all those major players in the maritime sector because we observe there is a massive loss of revenue in this particular regard, especially for tankers that are lifting our crew from the shore of our country from various terminals. And in one of our discussions with one of the players in that sector, they're making known to us that efforts being put in place to stem the tides of this oil theft and stealing. In 2021 alone, 44 ships, tankers were seized by the Nigerian Navy. After the first quarter of 2022, 13 vessels have been seized by the Nigerian Navy that contain our crude oil. So note that the Nigerian government is just sitting down doing nothing. They are working around the clock. And all these vessels that were stolen, they are working on it to see how it is returned back so that the crude oil can be properly disposed of and revenue related to this adequately reported. And to go a step further, we have invited the EFCC, who has been identified as one of those that all these tankers being seized are being returned to come and give explanation as to how the process of disposing of this product that has been stolen and recovered and returned to them. So they are working and they are doing everything to ensure that they stem the tides of this stealing of Nigerian oil theft. And I can tell you, there is a bigger committee now that involves all the sector, the security agencies, NNPC, and everybody that meets on a daily basis and review the security situation and the president of the country, President Muhammadu Buhari, has given that standing order that they should do everything to stem the tides of this stealing and return Nigeria back to its OPEC quota so that we can achieve it on the daily. And we are working around the clock. And I can assure you, in the next couple of weeks, this will definitely be addressed. On the issue of the borrowing, as explained by posited by one of my colleagues, I am very much aware that it was in this Senate that the president presented his borrowing plan for the initial budget deficit that was passed by this National Assembly. And we all approved the borrowing plan. The only one which we are looking at the executive have approached us and said, because of this amendment that we are proposing, there's going to be an increase of about 76.13 billion deficit. And we ask questions. How do we intend to fund this since we have passed the borrowing plan? And they said we have to look inward to raise funds to fund the 76.13 billion, and that is why we have approached the cheapest source of funding, which is the capital market. Either we like it or not, that is where we can get the cheap fund to fund this 76.13 billion that is being proposed in the new MTF working document. And on the issue of the subsidy, on the issue of the 3.99 to GDP, as much as I agree with them that it's a little bit on the high side, but don't forget that there is a proviso contained in the Fiscal Responsibility Act that empowers the president to do such when there are challenging times. And we all agree with us that security is a major challenge for us as a nation. The president has no choice than to raise this the threshold to GDP to 3.99. So he's still working within the confines of the law. He has not go outside of the law. If the situation returns normal, the threshold also will equally decrease. And also, my colleague also asked that the tax expenditure. Yes, I agree with you that the tax expenditure of 2.4 trillion naira is like granting tax holiday to some of these big corporations. That who are the beneficiaries? What are they using this fund for? I can authoritatively tell you that this tax expenditure was duly approved by the Federal Executive Council, and that those who benefited from this has to use this fund to construct some of the major roads across the nation, has also taken the roads, some of which are taken over by NNPC, and those benefiting from this tax expenditure are also currently working. I can testify to that of happening in Lagos and Ogun. And I know that they are working, know that this money, the only thing I believe I should ask my colleague to do is for us to do proper monitoring to ensure that this tax expenditure that has been given out is adequately utilized for the purpose in which it was given out for. But for all that it is not properly put to use or used, I don't want us to come to a conclusion in that regard, but I know that they are working along that line to ensure that we take care of all those expenditures that have been approved by the executive. The domestic debt service, Mr. President, that's what I will speak on now before I sit down. Now, I want to commend the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. This so-called debt we refer to are also from previous administrations. And we want to commend him for at least, I'm coming, distinguished colleague. For us, all the way, I'm coming.
Please, let's listen to the chairman in silence. Please. Chairman, you are protected. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your protection. Mr. President, I commend the President for at least doing everything to ensure that every time we are to pay back this debt, we are doing that on point. If he has decided to abandon the repayment plan or refuse to service the domestic debt, the country will be in a much difficult situation that we find ourselves. Because there will be no country to borrow us or any corporation to lend us money anymore. For him to be doing this and ensuring that he's servicing this debt, I think it deserves some commendation. It deserves some commendation. There is change of power in the next couple of months. Once it comes, the new president coming on board will also borrow. So it's not left only to the president. So we commend the president, and I believe everybody should also commend the president. Thank you, Mr. President. I so submit.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Distinguished colleagues, before we go to the recommendations of the committee, let me thank all our colleagues who have contributed in this debate, and in the course of this debate, very germane and critical issues have been raised, especially in the area of how the economy is affected because of loss in revenue as a result of oil theft. And of course, the other macroeconomic issues are genuine and concerning. For me, I think we shouldn't play politics with this. The truth is, we need to find answers. And I don't think the answers are going to be easy to come by. Radical decisions would have to be taken. But before we find answers, we have to live with this. But we have to be as fast as possible in looking for answers. I had a session with the Chief of Defense Staff about a month ago. And my discussion with him was on the oil theft and the efforts of our security agencies to combat this menace. And like we know, our security agencies are doing their best, but we have people, our people, who are sabotaging the oil industry, because the oil theft is not perpetrated by somebody else, but by people who are citizens. So we need to continue to support the security agencies in whatever way possible so that they're able to deal with this. I also believe that this, whether there's oil theft or not, until we stop the importation of refined products to Nigeria, we'll never get the best out of the oil industry, out of our oil and gas. Because let's assume we produce more than 1.1. Even if you are producing 2 million barrels or more, because we are going to import the refined products, whatever gain you would have made in selling your crude would be lost when you import the refined products. So we should work to ensure that we produce our refined products locally, because that's one way of cutting out our expenditure on importation. I also think that diversification of our economy is key, because we depend so much on this oil and gas industry. The slightest issue that affects it internationally affects us seriously in our country. So there are a lot of issues here. And I agree completely with most of the issues raised, except that of not passing it. Because we need to take immediate actions, and in fact, we are going to set up another committee on this oil theft matter, because we need to address it as a chamber. So with this, let's go to the recommendations on page 4. The committee recommends as follows. Recommendation 1, that we approve oil price benchmark of $73 per barrel. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. Recommendation 2, oil production volume of 1.6 million barrels per day. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. The PMS subsidy of 4 trillion. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. 4, a cut in the provision for federally funded upstream projects being implemented by 200 billion from 352.8. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. an increase in the federal government independent revenue of 400 billion. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Number 6, an additional provision of 182.45 billion naira to cater for the needs of the Nigeria Police Force. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Recommendation 7, domestic debt service provision of 76.13 billion naira and net reductions in statutory transfers by 66.07 billion naira. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. 7A, NDDC by 13.46 billion naira, NEDC by 6.30 billion naira, UBEC by 23.16 billion naira, Basic Health Care Fund by 11.58 billion naira, NASENI by 11.58 billion naira. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And the last one, the fiscal deficit of 7.35 trillion naira. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, distinguished colleagues, I will announce another committee to investigate the oil lifting or oil theft that has been bedeviling our oil industry, and the following is the membership of the committee. Senator Abasi Albert Akpan, Chairman. Senator Yusuf A. Yusuf, Member. Senator Solomon Adiola, Member. Senator Kabir Gay, Member. Senator Mohamed Adamaleru, Member. Senator George Thompson Sakibo, Member. Senator Gabriel Suswam, Member. Senator Kashim Shatima, Member. Senator Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, Member. Senator Ali Ndume, Member. Senator Stella Odwa, Member. Senator Sanu Musa, Member. And Senator Ibrahim Gobir, Member. This committee has a month to bring us the report on how the oil theft is going on, how we can mitigate it, and of course the resolutions that will help stop this. Leader of the Senate. Thank you.
Have they brought the, not yet? So, with this, Mr. President.
What about the conference reports? Yes.
With your permission, Mr. President, I wish to move that we step down for some few minutes. The second order of the day, which is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Appropriations on the 2022 Appropriation Act. They're actually just about finishing the compilation, and they will bring some copies here for us to approve. So with that, I move the motion for the Senate to briefly suspend the consideration of this to another for some few hours. I so move.
Leader, what you are reordering.
So that we can take the issue of, we can take the third order, it's the second order, and the second order is the third order. With your permission, I move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader, please go on. Leader, we may continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third order, which has become the second order of the day, is the presentation and consideration of the Conference Committee report on the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba Establishment Bill 2022. The distinguished senators will recall that the Senate and the House passed different versions of the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba Establishment Bill 2022. The Conference Committee on both sides have met and harmonized the differences in accordance with the Senate Standing Order number 86. Mr. President, we wish to invite distinguished Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, who is the chairman of the committee, to present and to present the report for the consideration of this August.
Okay, distinguished Senator Sabi Aliu Abdullahi. You are doing that in place of Senator Babakaita, the chairman, right? Oh, okay. You may proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues. I'm Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. Mr. President, I want to move that the Senate do receive the report of the Conference Committee on the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, to make comprehensive provision for due management, administration, and for other matters connected therewith. 2022. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do receive this report and consider it. I so.
I need a seconder. Distinguished Senator Kabirga.
Mr. President, I'm Kabiru Gaya, represent the people of Kano South from Kano State. I second the motion ably moved by the Deputy Whip that we present a report on the establishment of Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, to make comprehensive provision for the due management, administration, and for other matters related therewith. 2020.
Okay. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the Conference Committee report on the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, Establishment Bill 2022, say aye. Those against any ayes have it. Chairman, you may lead the report, please. You may present the report.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Report of the Conference Committee on a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, to make comprehensive provision for its due management, administration, and for other matters connected therewith, 2022, SB 282 and House of Representatives version, HB 789. It could be recalled that the Senate and House of Representatives have passed a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, to make comprehensive provision for its due management, administration, and for other matters connected therewith, 2022, SB 282, and the House of Representatives version, HB 789. However, some differences were noticed in the two versions of the bill as filed by the two chambers. Consequently, the Conference Committee was constituted by the two chambers to reconcile areas of differences that appeared in the two versions. The membership of the committee from the two chambers are page 2 and page 3. In furtherance of this assignment, the two chambers met and deliberated on the Senate and House of Representatives version of the bill. Similarly, the committee deliberated on the areas of differences and harmonized them accordingly. Furthermore, it was resolved that the harmonized version of the bill be adopted by each of the two chambers of the National Assembly for approval. Legislative summary. It should be stated at this juncture that in carrying out this legislative assignment, the committee adopted the following clauses in the Senate version. Thus, clauses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 11, 12, 13, 15, 17, 19. The long title, others are short titles, and schedules 1, 2, and 3 to the bill. While in the House version, clauses 6, 8, 9, 10, 14, 16, 18, 26, 27, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 were adopted. Recommendation. The Conference Committee recommends as follows. That the Senate and House of Representatives do consider and approve the Conference Committee report on a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, to make comprehensive provision for its due management, administration, and for other matters connected therewith 2022 SB 282 and House of Representatives version HB 789 as recommended. Conclusion. On behalf of the members of the Conference Committee, we wish to thank members of both chambers of the National Assembly for the opportunity to resolve areas of differences in this very important bill and recommend it for adoption. I so move, Mr. President.
Any comments? Okay. Senator Brown, go.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues.
Thank you, sir.
Your Excellency, this is a very straightforward report, and I don't think there is anything to dispute here. So I recommend that we go ahead and take it up.
Okay, distinguished Senator Sumata Adeyemi.
Your Excellency, I must thank you and thank members of the committee for the action taken so far. There is little or no issue much than the fact that it is just an upgrade of existing College of Agriculture which Sardauna established in 1964 and is still running OND courses. So the upgrade just enabled the institution to be able to award degree and employ and admit more students. I'm sure we are all happy for this development and we thank you for your support, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do approve the Conference Committee report on the Federal University of Agriculture, Kaba, Establishment Bill 2022, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Congratulations, distinguished Senator Sumata Adeyemi. Leader of the Senate, the next one.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day, which is the fourth, has now become the third order of the day, is the presentation and consideration of the Conference Committee report on the Federal Medical Center's Establishment Bill 2022. Distinguished senators will recall that the Senate and the House passed different versions of the Federal Medical Center Establishment Bill 2022. The Conference Committee on both sides have met and harmonized the differences in accordance with Senate Standing Order number 86. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the distinguished Senator Ibrahim Yahaya Oloregbe to move the motion for the Senate to consider the conference report.
Distinguished Senator Yahaya Ibrahim Oloregbe.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Ibrahim Yahaya Oloriegbe. I represent Kwara Central Senatorial District. I rise to move that the Senate do receive and consider the Conference Committee report on the Federal Medical Center Establishment Bill 2022. I so move, Mr. President.
I need a seconder. Distinguished Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the Good and Decent People of Kwara North and OR. Mr. President, I rise to second that the Senate do receive and consider the Conference Committee report on the Federal Medical Centers Establishment Bill 2022 SB 636. I so second.
Thank you. Those in favor that the Senate do receive and consider the Conference Committee report on the Federal Medical Centers Establishment Bill 2022, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. You may let the report, please. Yeah, you may present the report now.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate, that is sitting on Wednesday, 2nd March 2022, constituted a conference committee on the Federal Medical Center Establishment Bill 2022, and the House of Representatives did same on Thursday, 10 June 2021. The membership of the committees from both chambers are as listed on page 1 of the report. The committee, in carrying out its assignment, adopted the following methodology: held a meeting for a clause-by-clause consideration of the report, identified the differences in the bill as passed by the two chambers, and agree on the position as provided in this report. The recommendation of the committee, after a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill, the committee recommends that the conference report here attached be adopted by the Senate. The committee would like to thank the leadership of both chambers of the National Assembly and distinguished and honorable colleagues for the opportunity given to us to serve in this capacity. So the decision of the committee is as it is attached in the attached bill of the conference report in the column recommendation. I so submit, Mr. President.
Any comments? Senator Jika, do you have comments to make? You said there was going to be no seconder. Any comments? Okay. Those in favor that the Senate do approve the conference committee report on the Federal Medical Centers Establishment Bill 2022, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. Well, thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Leader of the Senate. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, due to the difficulty that we have in getting the budget appropriation people getting the budget out from the printers is just under printing. They have sent the clerk to explain to me that what we thought could have been done within the last 30 minutes was not possible. Because we don't want to keep people waiting in this hot environment for so long. I am moving the motion for us to suspend plenary, for us to reconvene at 3 o'clock, which I have been promised that the document will be ready for our consideration. I therefore move that this plenary suspends proceedings until 3 p.m. so that we can continue with the same session. Because if we adjourn, we are going into another session again. So I just use order 1B to suspend plenary to 3 o'clock in the afternoon so that we can continue with the current session that we are on. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Thank you very much. Before I put the question, let me emphasize what the leader said. We are expecting the Committee on Appropriations to make available copies of its report on the Appropriation Act 2022 Amendment Bill. And they promise by 3 p.m. the reports will be ready. So we will suspend plenary for the next 2 hours so that when we resume plenary at 3 p.m., the only item we'll consider is the report of the Committee on Appropriations, and then we close for our Easter break. So those in favor of the motion moved by the leader and seconded by the minority leader, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The plenary is suspended until 3 p.m.